Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast, learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 130, and I had the pleasure of talking to Mandy Patterson, a functional naturopath specializing in fertility and the founder of Boutique Wellness Practice, combining her expertise with personal experiences as a mother of 6. After overcoming her own fertility challenges, she earned a Doctorate of Naturopath and certifications from Institute of Integrative Nutrition and Institute of Functional Medicine to offer personalized fertility coaching. Mandy empowers women to achieve vibrant health and successful pregnancies through holistic approach, focusing on diet, stress management, lifestyle challenges tailored to each client's unique needs. Enjoy the conversation and thank you for watching and listening. Hello and welcome to Mandy. How are you, Mandy?
I'm so good. How are you?
I am well. I am well. I'm excited to have this conversation with you because of not only the topic, but your journey in itself in your roller coaster ride and your experience about infertility and the impact it had on your life and the outcome of it, because I've had my fair share of experience of infertility as well.
Yeah.
However, this conversation is about you, and I'm curious to learn with the journey that you've been through in the ups and downs, the struggles of what the medical system is saying, the allopathic and the natural and the alternative, and the whole time in your own emotional roller coaster involved.
Yeah.
Now coming on the other side of it, 6 children later,
Yes.
what do you believe about yourself? And does it define who you are at this
Yeah,
moment of time?
that's a great question. I really do believe that we are gifted circumstances in our life that direct us down a certain path and a journey. And so, as you alluded to, I had pregnancy challenges with my first one. Um, and I can dive into a little bit of that story if you're open to
Yeah,
that here.
yeah.
I was pregnant with my first son, had experienced a miscarriage before, but he ended up being born 3 months premature. I had developed severe pre-eclampsia, which for the listeners is pregnancy-induced hypertension. And it became life-threatening for me because I developed kidney and liver failure. And so
Mm,
happened very suddenly and very quickly. I was working at that time as an occupational therapist and, had a busy life, right? We're all busy, but I had some warning signs earlier in that week that there were some things that were not okay and
mm,
they were off. And health symptoms. And so I had reached out to my doctor and they said, oh, just go put on some support hose and you'll be fine. But there was this nagging, like guttural instinct that I needed to dive in deeper and figure out what was going on. So that was a Friday when I actually went into the hospital. And when I did go in, they, pretty much told me, you're probably not going to survive. Your son is probably not going to survive. And, this is the reality. You need to get your things in order. So for me, I was a young 23-year-old, I feel like kid at that point, right? I was still a baby. And to be told that just literally brings you to your knees,
yeah.
right? And you know that, your life is possibly going to end.
Mhm.
And that's it. But I feel like I have this fiery, like, spirit in that I just don't accept what people tell me is going to be my reality. And I think, that really it has been a segue into the work that I do from a transformational side of things in helping people understand from a mind body standpoint that, we ourselves are our best advocates. And, the power is within us.
That's right.
As we've discussed, we're energetic beings and we have spirit and those things. And I think recognizing the power within ourselves. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that was the start of my journey into motherhood and just being a advocate for the patients and the clients that I've worked with for the past 25 years.
Mhm. It's quite a journey, and I can only imagine. I remember when I was 23, pretty
Yeah.
feisty and pretty, hard-headed in I know my own domain, and this is my conviction, and this is how I'm going to go for it and move forward. So I imagine when doctors presented you with that scenario, that fiery instinct, if I can say, because I don't know you that well yet,
Yes.
in that instinct kicks in of no, I need this to work in another way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just felt that, um, I'm a Christian and I just felt like God was saying, this is not it. This is, you're going to have to do hard things, but you can do it and it'll be fine. And like, I just literally my entire life, like, having six children, multiple of them have had health issues over the years. And
Mhm.
the things that I've had to do and what I've had to take a stand for is mind blowing to me time and time again that,
Mm.
what we are presented with in our lives, so many of us struggle to stand up and say, no, this isn't okay. Like I need a second opinion or a third opinion, or, I'm going to pivot here and I'm going to go seek somebody that actually listens to me
Right.
because, the clients that come to me have been gaslit for years or they've been told that
Mm.
it's in their head and, I really walk hand in hand with them to give them that support that they don't get
Yes,
in the traditional system.
that's right. What do you think is the tipping point of that? Because we grow up as from children to teens into young adulthood that we lean onto a system, a society that says, we're going to take care of you. Everything's going to be okay. You got to trust us. We're the professionals and we're the experts. So let us do our thing and take our
Yes.
word verbatim because we know.
Right.
What do you think is that tipping point from being in that space to your gut instinct saying, no, it's not. We need to look at this and go this. Like, how does that how does that marry up with your own experiences and potentially with your client's experience? Because my experience was very, very different.
Yeah, I think, you've even alluded to, just talking about that Eastern Western perspective,
Mhm.
and, let's be honest, both sides, like they have benefits. Um,
Absolutely.
both of them do. And then, they also have the downside of not providing people what they need. And, I really speak to this obviously being in traditional medicine for many, many years. Like I worked in all sectors of healthcare from the hospital to subacute care, ICUs. I worked in the NICU. I did home
Mm.
health, outpatient rehabilitation. So I really did see it all.
Right.
And we're fantastic in the United States with emergency medicine. Like we,
Yeah.
if you're anywhere in the world and you have an emergent situation, you want to be in the United States. I mean, like they
Right.
are going to take care of you.
Yes.
Um, you know, we have fantastic care when it comes
Yeah.
to that. What we have an issue with is equipping and empowering people to be healthy
Right.
and to be the best versions of themselves because it has become such a passive system where you just come in, you tell your doctor what's going on, and
Hmm.
they give you a pill for that ill and they send you on their way.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, many people have found, you know, okay, the pills are not taking care of this, and I feel worse, and, how do I navigate this? And so, I think that we all have things in our lives where like there's something pivotally that we have a shift. And for
Mhm.
me, that shift was literally when I was 23 having this baby. And like I really had to stand up for him. And in fact, my story is that 2 weeks into him being born, he was in the NICU where we live, and he was having a lot of challenges. He was on life support,
Mhm.
and he was fighting off a lot of infections because preemies just are
Mhm.
susceptible to
Mhm.
lots of
Right.
infection. And they ended up having to handbag him, which basically means they were resuscitating him.
Mm.
And what I had found out that day is previously that they had told the neonatologist that he had blood in his stool, and he didn't really tell me or do anything about it. And so what it ended up progressing into was a crisis.
Mm.
And so that evening was literally, I was on my knees thinking that my baby wasn't going to survive.
Mhm.
And there was just this, like, I don't even know what it was, if it was a God thing
Mhm.
where I just heard, you've got to get him out of here. And so and that was a level 3 NICU. So, I mean, this was
Wow.
a very, very
Yeah.
like fantastic facility, right? And so I obviously being in the medical system, I knew where to start looking. And I started looking outside of our town, which is it's a city of 200,000, and started going and looking for the main major hospitals like in
Right.
Indianapolis, Louisville, and St.
Right.
Louis. And so I actually made that decision that next day. I was transferring him out, and
Wow.
that they did not like that
Mhm.
because you know they were they
Of
were like,
course.
well, we're doing everything we can. And I just gutturally knew. And so I think, going even back to that Eastern perspective, in that we have to listen to our bodies, we have to listen to ourselves. Like we are source, and we have that
Mhm.
power within us. And I think, unfortunately, so many people have been beat down by this system to think that they don't have that they have to
Right.
be reliant on a doctor to tell them what to do when they
Right.
themselves are their best doctor, you
Mhm.
know?
Yes.
Um, so that kind of, I hopefully bridges it for you in
Mhm.
kind of seeing the broader picture,
Yeah.
and transformation that,
Yeah.
we can set for ourselves.
What was your narrative and your process in making that decision and being strong about it in moving him out? Granted, it was probably feels like a lifetime ago because he's an adult now, from what I
Yeah.
understand.
He's 22.
Right?
Yeah.
So your own conviction and your own stance to counteract everything that these professionals in these hospitals are saying to you and pushing that through, because thinking about the medical system and all the people in it, and especially level 3 NICU, you've got a team of people supporting you in that journey and supporting you in that process. What was your process to say, no, I know what I'm doing, regardless of what you're telling me, but this is what I'm doing, and this is what it's going to look like, and this is my choice?
Yeah. I think that next morning, like it was just like I knew I had to do something else. It was life or death. And if I didn't do it, that move him, that he was possibly going to die. Like I knew
Right.
that. And so I think as moms, like we have that protective, nurturing quality in us. And you see these things where like a toddler's trapped under a car and like a mom lifts the car up, right?
Right.
I
Yeah.
literally felt like that was kind of the situation that I was in.
Yes.
And I just started calling hospitals. I called my insurance company. I was like, I need to move my child out of this NICU to a higher level NICU. He's got these things going on. And so I just sprung into action, really.
Right.
It was like instinctive. Like, I've got to protect myself. I got to protect my baby. And for
That's right.
me, like, it didn't matter. It was like, as a healthcare professional, I was like, my job is to make sure that we have our needs met. It's not to keep people happy and make friends
Yeah.
and to disappoint people. And, we walked in there and told them we were moving him. And I mean, they were not happy.
Mhm.
I mean, they weren't. And it was like, I'm sorry, I appreciate all you've done for me and my baby. But I know I have to move him. And, interestingly enough, so we got him, it was 3 hours away from our home where we moved him to this other NICU, Riley Hospital in Indianapolis. And when we got him up there, the physicians that were there, it's a teaching hospital because it's affiliated
Okay.
with IU.
Right.
They told us, he by far is not our sickest baby up here. And where we were from, like he was definitely the sickest.
Right.
So that gave me peace of mind.
Yeah.
And so once they got him stabilized, he was still on a ventilator for quite a long time, but had progressed after about, I would say, 4 weeks, to kind of the step down unit. But he had an issue in the middle of the night where his stomach blew up, and they called me in the middle of the night and were like, we've got big issues. We're going to have to stop his feedings. And what had happened was that I started piecing it all together, was that when he had been back at home, he was kind of, an infection was brewing.
Mhm.
And that's why his respiratory status was so compromised, and they were having to like increase his life support on the
Mhm.
ventilator.
Mhm. Mhm.
But at that moment of time, what it came up was that he had scar tissue
Mm.
throughout his small and his large intestine from that infection, and it was blocking anything going through.
Right.
So we were kind of at that point where it was like he was going to need an emergent surgery,
Yeah.
and they weren't equipped back at home. So it
So
was kind of like
integrative.
God was showing me,
Yeah.
okay, this is why you're here,
Yes.
and this is why you took the stand. And so it started all making sense to me. And sometimes, in life, we never know what we're being called to do. And sometimes we never figure it out. But like,
Yeah.
I feel like there is a divine plan there. And so, yeah, that's how it all
Yeah.
kind of came together.
Yeah.
So,
And was that, do you think, the catalyst of there's something else to do? Granted, you'd had 5 children after that.
yes.
When was that tipping point for you? Because obviously you've been in the healthcare system for a while and in the industry of serving and supporting people with your skills and knowledge. What was your tipping point of saying, no, this is the avenue that I need to take? This is where I can be of greater service.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for many years, I actually stayed in the system and worked, they call it PRN, which means they would call me and I would say yes or no. And that worked really well for my family because, for many years I had young children that I was
Mhm.
raising, and they were my priority. And
Mhm.
so I guess that was about 15 years ago when I kind of went back and started immersing myself in alternative holistic medicine. And I went down the path of, I got a health coaching certification, and then just kept learning and decided to go back and get my naturopathic doctorate. And then did board certifications in functional medicine.
Right.
But when I actually decided that I needed to leave the system,
Mhm.
was roughly 2 years ago. I had my husband and I had lived over in Australia for 2 years, with our kids. And so I had gone online in 2017, which was a real blessing because then, the whole world shut down in 2020. And we literally made it back to the US like days before they shut down
Wow.
borders and did all of that. So I kind of was thrust at that point back into doing, being called into the hospital, and I was working the front lines
Mhm.
when all of COVID was going down. But my my practice on the side had just really taken off, and people were hungry to learn more, and they wanted to know more about naturopathic and functional medicine. And I just felt like my calling was much greater than my time that was being used in the hospital. And so I actually did resign,
Right.
and since then, have really continued to build my practice. And then I partnered with my business partner, Dr. Jeannie Sheffley, and we both do infertility together. And we launched a group coaching program for couples struggling with infertility.
Mhm.
So,
How, beautiful of a story that it unfolded the way it did. But what we know for sure is we sometimes don't know the reasons why we do certain things because that strength, because that calling or the action or that desire gets so big that it becomes difficult for us to contextualize and say, oh, this is what it is and that's what it is. So I think that's
Yeah,
really interesting.
so right. I mean, it's just been that's been my journey and story. And it's never been easy. But I think that when we recognize our life can be so much richer and that is where the shift comes in. And I think that so many people don't know what good health feels like, that they're walking around just exhausted, worn down, like, I see so many things like gut issues,
Yeah.
hormone issues, and it's overwhelming and they just don't know who to trust, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so much information out on the internet. There's so many different people that are saying that they can quickly fix their challenges and give them, medications or supplements or whatever. But I think really what we're missing is that inner work,
Mhm.
really pausing and getting connected back to ourselves and who we are as individuals and what our passions in life are, what drives us, because we all have, amazing skill sets to share with the world. And so,
Absolutely.
I think when we start to do that inner work is
Yeah.
when it kind of starts to come out. So,
There's a lot more involved with experiences and things that happen to our bodies,
yeah.
to our relationships, to the people around us, our environment. The whole thing is way more involved than just cerebral.
Amen. Yep.
And perhaps the system out there, the Western system, which is brilliant because you break an arm and they can fix it. It's
Yes. Yes.
brilliant for that. But the other spectrum of that, of looking at the other chain and the emotional impact that happens, I think is possibly, is from my experience, a very missing big piece of that puzzle.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Massive. So for you, one busy lady running a business as well, a coaching business for individuals, but also managing a household as well. What do you feel are some of the attributes that you have either garnered along the way or you've repurposed and redefined for yourself that connects you to the purpose and staying on track with it? Because I would imagine there's lots of ebbs and flows that happen in business. I know I've seen it in mine and it's evolved and it's changed and it's transformed in many different ways for different people. How do
Yes.
you maintain your attributes and skill sets that attach you to the purpose and this calling that you have?
Yeah, I think, I was asked this question even yesterday on, what makes you get up in the morning from a heart-centered business perspective? And I think it is the people that I come in contact every single day. So like just a short glimpse into like my week has been talking to a mom who has stage 4 cancer and the system's given up on her and they're not going to give her any chemo or radiation and are sending her on her way, and connecting at a human level and just sharing some pearls with her on things that could help her, is what is my calling. And like, I sat with a mom yesterday on the phone, and she's got a son who's got mental health issues. He's 18 and struggling, and, they're dealing with his outbursts and challenges and just the things that, he has going on. And it's really took a toll on her health. And so I love what I do because I get to sit and connect with humans every single day. And I get them, I I get their time, and I feel like, my calling is to like, just for them to simply know that other people care and that professionals do care. And that's really what I'm working to do to disrupt in our system is, our system has become almost robotic or, just very cold.
Mhm.
And I want that to change. I think we need to go back to our roots. I think we need to go back like 50, 70 years ago when there was the local town doc who visited homes and like had connections with all those family members. And he or she was trusted and like, there was that partnership. And so, that's where I really do feel like, practitioners like myself that are visionaries, along with health coaches and so many other people out there with so many gifts, like Eastern, Western, medicine,
Mhm.
nurses, you know, like I'm trying to think of all of the different types of professionals. There's dietitians, there's
Yeah,
nutritionists, there's
yeah,
therapists, there's
it's
like
lots.
so many people
Mm.
that are heart-centered and really want people to get better. And
Right.
so that's what gets me up every day. That's what um propels me in my mission and juggling all the things that I do. I just simply want people to feel loved and I want them to feel heard and know that they matter.
What are some of the skill sets that you have tailored and that you have built and developed for yourself that allow you to do that for others?
Yeah, I've gone through extensive coaching programs. I've had coaches myself over the years, business partners, that have mentored me. And so I really feel like that we all need a coach or we all need a mentor in our life that's speaking and pouring into ourselves, especially we're on the front lines of doing such
Hmm.
transformational work.
Hmm.
Because can quickly result in burnout. And, I've been there where I'm just really exhausted some weeks, and my body's like, you need to slow down. You need to go for a walk. You need to connect with your kids and play a game, And so I really do feel like, that that's necessary for growth and keeping us on track.
What have you seen that you need as a standard in place for you so you can harness your expertise
Yeah.
that you can support others? What are some of the staples that you need in your life that put you in that place
Yeah, that's a
rather
great
than going
question.
into that place of burnout?
Yeah, so I really do block out time on my calendar, turn off my phone, disconnect. I am an avid exerciser. So like my routine is usually I drop my boys at school in the morning and then you'll find me at the gym. I'm at the gym, I'm lifting weights or I'm rowing or I'm on the treadmill doing yoga. So that's like, I feel like movement is medicine. So
Hmm. Hmm.
and then also like nourishing my body, right? I really work to make sure that we have healthy meals. And it's challenging when you've got older kids, younger kids that are doing sports and activities in the evening. Like many nights, we don't get home until 8 o'clock at night. But, I really work to make sure we have good meals to fuel our bodies. And like, just setting aside time, like, prayer time is important for me where like,
Right.
reading scripture and writing in my journal. And I think that those are, we need to have self-care practices in place in order to be the best versions of ourselves and in
Hmm.
order to give a lot to the world. It's
Hmm.
absolutely necessary.
Hmm. Absolutely. But what we know for sure is we can only give to others based on how much we give to ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, it's that whole analogy of a cup, being poured out is that, we need to make sure our cup is full, and make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And then that gives us more space to be able to pour into others.
Absolutely. And until we get into that space, then we're giving from an empty cup, and that's when burnout happens, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And that's the tricky part. That's the tricky
it is
part.
tricky.
Yeah. What is you talked about your intentions of doing this so other people can be more advocates for themselves in whatever challenges that are presented to them. What else do you see coming down the path, coming down the road for you as you go on this journey of supporting others, not only in infertility, but general health for themselves or their children? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I really feel like we're on the cusp of an awakening, or it's starting, where people are asking more questions, they're pushing back, they are unsettled with the way their care has been. And so they're turning to alternative sources and places. And let's be honest, COVID kind of was the you know, start of so many people going online, practitioners. And so there's a lot more options out there now. And I think,
Mhm.
functional medicine has become more of a standard of care, like it's coming. And so, I think that um, I only see that people are going to really put their stake in the ground and are going to say, like, I need more support here. And so I think what we're going to see is even a transformation in our medical system. There's like, we're at a tipping point, right? Even from a medical insurance side of things, like, people are getting sicker and sicker, and mental health is on the sky rise. Like infertility, like 1 in 6 to 1 in 8 have been quoted to say that they're having, going to have challenges down the road. And so, I feel like that, rising to that challenge, and even in my own practice, what I'm trying to do is make it more scalable and affordable for people. Like, I see people one-to-one, and I run extensive testing, lab work, all those things. But I'm really leveraging group coaching in my practice, where people can come together in safe communities and hubs and ask the questions that they want to be able to ask their doctor, but they don't have the time with them to do. So I have, the group coaching model going, and then also a membership, which is a lower end membership. We're launching it next month for, my business. And it's a lower end cost, and it's basically going to include cleanses, recipes, discounts on their supplements. They will have the opportunity to upgrade with lab work with me. And, it's just going to be a community. I see community as being where we need to shift to versus being in silos.
Mhm.
And I really do feel like community medicine is where we need to go.
Mhm. Mhm. It's great that you're offering these services and the support structure
Yeah.
for individuals to come to the table and get that. However, my curiosity leads to the narrative that's running out there in what the basis of where these stats are coming, the 1 in 6. What is that measured against, and how old is that data that it's been measured against? Because we know that some of the practices that happen in our Western medical system are way older than they've not caught up to current date.
Yeah.
So my curiosity and even my own experiences where I got thrown some of those stats were not only out of context from my perspective, but also had somewhat very, they had an attachment, let me find my words. They had an attachment to shame.
Yeah.
They had an attachment to shame that brought about a different perspective for myself,
Mm.
similarly to a narrative that I think is running out there of individuals, women who are going through a menstrual cycle. And if you're going through a menstrual cycle and you're not in pain, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Because the narrative out there is that you must be in pain in order for us to help you and serve you. So we're going to keep pushing that message and pushing
Yeah.
that model rather than saying this is what it should be and let's aim for that. That's what I'm hearing on just a women's health perspective. And in the fertility world, it's there's a lot wrapped around that in putting individuals in a space of disempowerment. So
Yes.
perhaps that bigger narrative of, or the bigger agenda, if dare I say, of these other professionals can come in and bulldozer
Yeah.
potentially
Yeah.
over your own instinct and your own awareness, because then you become a fish out of water. I
Yeah.
know I said a lot there. So,
No, you're so right. And like, I go to top reproductive conferences. Like I am affiliated with A4M, and actually was just at an infertility conference not too long ago. And those are the statistics that they're giving us. I'll say just as a practitioner with the boots on the ground, grassroots, in the trenches with all the people, I do feel like, it's on the rise and it is tied back to so much of that disempowerment and, like you said, shame.
mhm,
Like even the mom that I was talking to yesterday, that son struggling with these mental health issues, she's just like, I don't know where to turn. I don't know where to go. I don't necessarily want my kid on medications if he doesn't have to be.
right.
And she's petrified, because we live in this system that bullies. It's systematic bullying. And, even if you start diving into the business behind medical care,
Massive,
um, it's huge.
massive.
And here's the thing, and I want to set this straight here. Some women just do need IVF and IUI, and it does help create miracles. Like, sometimes there's situations where their reproductive system has been damaged, or they've got scarring
Sure.
or inflammation, and they're just not able to conceive. And in fact, I just had a client that recently had a baby the IVF way, but we did the work leading up to that to get
Sure.
her body in the healthiest place. So, but an average IVF clinic, they know when a couple walks in the door, they're going to make $75,000
Easy.
because, one round of IVF
That's
costs
right.
$20,000 to $30,000.
Mhm.
And that is the sad reality of it. And, I feel like that's where I can speak from a voice of reason and saying, you know, the thing is it's really not that expensive to get healthy. People just don't know what to do. They don't know if they should do the keto diet. They don't know if they should do the carnivore diet, the Mediterranean diet. Like there's hundreds of dietary approaches and all these things, but like what we forget to remember is we ourselves hold the power. And when we can allow all of that just to die down, and we can focus on ourselves, when we can bring ourselves in alignment and in a state of peace, that's when we can start to shift and kind of posing it from the standpoint of our body doesn't discriminate stress. So it doesn't discriminate between like an internal infection, like simmering infection, or something larger in our life. Maybe it's a bad relationship. Maybe we've got a stressful work environment. It doesn't distinguish between that and us like running from a robber or a Bengal tiger,
Mhm,
like
mhm,
literally,
mhm, mhm.
because as
That's right.
humans, we're hardwired to fight off anything. And
Yeah,
so, unfortunately, so many people are just living in that sympathetic dominant state that
constantly.
is not set for good health and
Yeah.
fertility and for healthy hormones and good gut health and all of those things. So that leads me to say too, that's what I really strive for in my practice is educating, empowering, and equipping people with the tools that they need to be the healthiest versions of themselves.
Ultimately, yes, Mandy, I completely agree. I went on that journey myself, and I'm sure there's lots of people who can offer and support that, but I totally agree. For me, the bigger question is, how did we get to this narrative of disempowerment on a bigger
Yeah.
level?
Yeah.
And is it this wonderful world of marketing, which to a certain degree I'm going to shame a little bit, even though I was in that industry for a number of years?
Yeah. Yeah.
But is it that bombardment of information? Is it the technology piece? What is it that's really put us in that space that we feel so disempowered and we don't know really what is the right step because there's set messages and signs and they're coming from everywhere. What
Right.
happened?
And if we go back to the early 1900s, that's kind of when the homeopaths, the naturopathic doctors, and the chiropractors were kind of pushed out of the system. And that had to do with Rockefeller medicine and when the American Medical Association was set up
Yeah,
and big pharma started back then.
right.
So I think it's a deeper question in that it goes back decades upon decades, even
Mhm.
100 years that,
Fantastic.
we've been on this path. And I just feel like we're just at that precipice. We're at that breaking point where people are saying, no more. I am going to do something else. Like, I can't do this anymore. And so, and even when we talk about the disempowering side of things, so what's interesting is when I lived in Australia, Australia doesn't allow commercials on pharmaceuticals.
Mm.
But here in the United States, we are
It's everywhere.
bombarded
It's
when
everywhere.
we're watching anything on TV with pharmaceuticals, solutions, semaglutide for weight loss. And um,
There's always somebody skipping on a beach. Uh-huh.
it is. It is. And so like I think the tentacles go deep. And I think, for us in our age, we've really kind of seen it. And I think COVID, the COVID crisis woke so many people up
Right.
to what was going on. And so, to your point, it's complicated to reverse ourselves out of that, right?
But I don't know if it is a reverse. I think it's possibly just the evolution of
Shifting and pivoting.
humanity,
Yeah.
but also finding that beautiful balance of how can we utilize technology, but how can we utilize our own instinct at the same time and have them be in tandem. But in the same token, that's that amazing push-pull that we're going to have between for-profit and not for-profit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, perhaps that's just the way the world is built in a capitalist form in certain parts of the world. But
Yeah. I
it's
agree. And I think too, like, as holistic providers that aren't inside the insurance system, it's challenging for us because we're pay out of pocket. And from an affordability side of things, for many people,
for
it's
sure.
so much. But even like for myself, like, my husband also runs his own business. So he's a business owner as well. And, we don't have dental insurance. And like I had to take my kids in the last month, and some of them had cavities and some other work that needed to be done. Like our bill was like $3,500 to $4,000
Mm,
just to take care of the dental aspect for 8 people.
right.
Um, so, I don't like to really frame it around you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. But the reality of it is there needs to be urgency around making health shifts now so we don't put ourselves in a place down the road where like there were things that could have been avoided had we gotten the proper
Sure.
care that we
Sure.
need.
Yeah. And I think that's the perhaps take home message for everybody listening and watching is to be your own advocate and to be in tune with your own gut instinct and
Yes.
become aware of where the messages are coming. The messages are coming from an external source or the messages are coming from an internal source. And let's unravel that and unwrap it to see and getting the results that you're seeking and that you're desiring, be it for fertility or good mental health or whatever that looks like, and leaning to people for support, I think is possibly my take home message. Do you have anything else to add to
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah. No, I think it's just knowing that you're your best advocate. Listen
Mhm.
to that gut instinct, like you said, and just finding providers that will be partners with you on the journey versus being more that authoritative, like just
Right.
listen to me, take this. But look for people that are going to educate, empower, equip you, and be walk that walk with you,
Sure.
right? That's what we need
Yeah,
is empowerment.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Beautiful. Well, I could talk to you for much longer, and I appreciate you taking the time, the energy, and your stories and experiences. It's been a whirlwind, huh? It's been a
It
whirlwind for you to bring you to this space, but I appreciate you sharing and I honor your gifts that you share with others. So thank you, Mandy, for being on the show. And yeah, I'm excited to learn about all the other support you can offer to everybody else. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful.
I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.